Thanks for listening to the True Sports Physical Therapy Podcast. Today's guest, if you are interested in being an outstanding physical therapy student, if you want to know how to pass the boards, if you want to know how to choose the right first job, and even how to put together an outstanding session for athletes of all levels, this podcast is for you. So listen all the way through. Take some notes. Let it change whatever it is you're doing to optimize your outcomes and share it with anyone who wants to be better at physical therapy. Today's guest is the newly Dr. Kevin Lynch. Kev's background is unbelievable. I have known and watched this guy since he was in 10th grade. He just passed his boards, got his doctorate. Along the way, he started at Queen's University playing lacrosse, which at the time was a Division II school. He then transferred and walked on to University of Delaware, one of the premier lacrosse programs in the country, became a captain of that team, stayed on for a 5th year so he could get a certificate in business and continue out his Division I career, and then just got his doctorate from the University of Maryland, Baltimore. Outstanding guy, outstanding clinician. I've seen it firsthand. You're going to learn a ton. Without further ado, here is Dr. Kevin Lynch. Welcome back to the True Sports Physical Therapy Podcast. This one is going to be super easy for me. It's always easy for my guest. We got Dr. Kevin Lynch, newly Dr. Kevin Lynch on the pod. Kev, introduce yourself. Tell us how you got to where you are.
Thanks for having me on. So doctor of, I think, 2 days now. I just found out my test results.
Congrats, man.
I'll be a graduate of University of Maryland, Baltimore. Our graduation is next Tuesday. From Carroll County, Maryland originally. Grew up, went to small public high school, ended up going to the University of Delaware with kind of a unconventional route. Did PT school after that, and then now I'm here looking forward to joining True Sports here at the Bear Hills location in Timonium.
Dude, you skip so many important things, and important things because to me, they're what made you stand out. So we'll get back to what makes you so unique, why I'm dying to have you on the pod and tell your story and give us some advice on how you got to where you are and how to be successful. But before we jump into that, you just took your boards. You just passed your boards. There are thousands of PTs out there listening to this, or prospective PTs listening to this, that are terrified of this test. So how did you prep? What was it actually like?
So UMB did a good job. They gave us therapy ed, which has like 2 course manuals, which is just like a pretty dry textbook, to be honest, and then an online software where you get 3 practice tests, and then you have the option to buy practice questions. And I thought therapy ed did a great job with the practice questions. I ended up buying those. They break it down by section, so like you'll have like your MSK set of questions, neuro, integumentary, the whole kit and caboodle. That's really what I used. I read the textbook, took notes kind of on each chapter, which was for some maybe a little bit dry. And then after each chapter that I was taking notes on, I would rip a bunch of test questions. Maryland also gave us 2 PETs, which is like the practice exam given by the FSBPT, who actually administers the NPTE. So I think a combination of plenty of practice exams, taking your own handwritten notes, and then also on my commute to work or practice workouts, whatever, I was ripping podcasts that I found on Spotify.
What were those? They have podcasts that tell you how to pass this thing?
A lot of the podcasts that I came across, ones that you didn't have to pay for, they were just on free streaming services. Oftentimes they just give a practice question and then they kind of just talk through it. They'll be like, here's the case scenario, here's our 4 options, let's talk about each one and why one is right, one is wrong, why one is better than the other. And they're like 15 minutes a pot. I believe it was called the Clinical Files. This guy, Kyle Rice, I think he does a good job of being pretty well-spoken and kind of, I don't want to say like dumbing it down, but being very clear and like articulated about how each answer works or doesn't work.
Okay, then you get in front of the exam. It's a forever long exam. Because it's so fresh in your memory, what do you remember from the MSK world that made you pause?
I think there's plenty about like special tests, which UMB I think did a good job harping on that a lot in our curriculum for the first 2
What are they
years.
asking?
They'll show like a picture about someone doing like internal rotation here, being like, what test is this? Or they'll describe in words, like emotion being like, patient is sidelining on a table and the therapist is like an Ober test, like they'll describe and like they'll be like, what is this testing for? Um, and the therapy ed textbook that we got does a good job of, because it's pretty dry, there aren't a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
Reading all that stuff out, I was able to like write down like, I guess the word process of how each test works, as opposed to just looking at a picture. Because I think sometimes you can get confused. Oh, I see a picture. Obviously, I know that's the Hawkins Kennedy, but when they're describing it in words, it can kind of get a little screwed up in your head.
Okay, so you've had a bunch of clinical experience, both as a student of True Sports, also now you're a strength coach in your spare time. You know your way around an outpatient MSK setup. Do
Yeah.
you feel like the test correlates to a successful outpatient orthopedic physical therapist?
Um, I don't think so. I think there's a lot of trivial things that they're testing for, a lot of valuable stuff, like definitely red flag scenarios that you want to look for, and all like pretty baseline, but they're not asking about when we're transitioning from different phases of rehab, how to progress or regress movements. I don't know. I think there's a lot that's left on the table. I was fortunate enough during my PT schooling, I took the CSCS exam.
You think that
I
helped?
felt like that was way more applicable to like the MSK setting
Gotcha.
overall.
Okay, I get that question a lot of applicants or new grads. Should I take my CSCS? Does it matter? What do you think about that? You think it is imperative to take that?
Um, so I was one of those applicants and like younger students asking you, other faculty at UMB, like, does it really matter if I get this?
Yeah.
The answer I often got was like, I mean, it's nice to have letters next to your name. Um, which, yeah, but I do think getting my CSCS helped me immensely in my outpatient rotation and my rotation with you guys. Um, I think as far as like exercise prescription, whether that's like um, volumes, loads, and then like kind of progressing plyometrics, especially. I think it gave me a step ahead when I did come to True Sports, because talking to my classmates, I think what we struggled with the most, or I didn't feel like I necessarily struggled with, was that advanced stage of rehab where now we're working on more complex movements, cutting, looking for those deviations and how we're going to correct them. So I think sitting for something like the CSCS was extremely beneficial for me for this setting.
Yeah, and how much prep did you have to put in for that exam?
Um, so I worked pretty hard for that one. Let's see, I took it in March. I started studying in January, and my goal was to finish a chapter. I think I was doing like a chapter a week. Same idea, pretty dry textbook. I would go through a chapter, take my own handwritten notes, and then take a bunch of practice questions, practice tests. Um, and I went straight through the NSCA site. There's a lot of like study like programs, I guess you want to call it, from outside people. I went straight to NSCA, which was a little bit pricier, but if they were offering their own practice material, I figured the test was going to come straight from there. Um,
And it did?
so
It
it took
looked like
me,
that?
yeah, absolutely. I
Okay.
think it, like, I could tell it was written by the NSCA.
The
Um,
same people.
yeah. Um, but yeah, 3 months, and I was every night doing something with that textbook, sometimes more hours than others, but it took me about like 3 months.
I mean, my take on that, and this is probably the advice I gave you. I probably talked to you about the letters and how important or not important they are. To me, it just shows that you take this strength and conditioning aspect seriously. I don't think it guarantees that you are now a strength and conditioning expert. I think it just shows that you did exactly what you described. 3 months, you had to put in the work. It shows you give a damn about this. Sometimes that can be show me you're a cut above. But it also, if you were a personal trainer or a strength coach in your spare time and you had a CPT, you didn't have your CSCS, I don't care. I just care that you have dedicated yourself to the profession. And I think you're spot on, at least in my limited experience, of PT school doesn't give you that. They're too worried about EKG, integumentary. I haven't heard that word in a really long time. Like filling your head with garbage that doesn't apply to MSK. This is a way to like fill in those holes and those gaps appropriately. So I like seeing it. It's not a must. I think if you don't have that, I want to see that you've had experience in the strength and conditioning atmosphere, either as an athlete or as a coach. I think that goes a long way. What else did you miss in grad school that you think you needed to prepare you for true sports?
This again, talking with my classmates, I touched on this a little bit, movement deviations. And I think this goes beyond true sports itself. I think in any setting where we see, let's say, someone with a stroke and we're just working on like mini squats or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think our school didn't really encapsulate like what we would expect to see, like when people do come in with a new injury, a new deficit, anything like that. And then, okay, now let's identify it. How are we going to attack and work on that? And that kind of ties into the lack of like exercise prescription that we really go through. A lot of times in school, they kind of chalk it up to, oh, like you'll just gain your clinical eye, you'll gain your clinical experience, your exercise book is gonna grow just by experience. And I think a lot of people may be overwhelmed when they go to true sports or even like an outpatient neuro place where it's like, okay, I see what's going on. I did my eval. What are the exercises I'm going to do to challenge this person?
Yeah.
Um, I think
I
a
mean, I
lot of
think
us struggle with
I
that.
think that's a great point. Like that framework, I wish was better highlighted in our graduate school curriculum. Of here's the right way to do a given movement, even as simple as a mini squat. Here's how people will cheat.
Yeah,
Here are your correctives, and like take that three-pronged approach to every movement. Now you have decreased that learning curve because you're eventually going to figure it out 3-4 years into your career. The goal of graduate school should be to decrease that learning curve. Unfortunately, I think it's how do we get our kids to pass the NPTE,
absolutely.
right? So I
Yeah.
think that would go a long way. Now, this goes back to some of the stuff you left out from your unbelievable background. You started at a place called Queens College, middle of
Yep.
nowhere, Carolina. Which is Division II.
They were two at the time when I went, and then now they've since bumped up to Division One.
Okay. So you go to a Division II school. You then migrate to a Division I program at Delaware. While you're doing that, you're playing varsity lacrosse. You're playing Division I lacrosse. You got a undergraduate degree in exercise science, and then you stuck around to get a business certificate. You then went on during graduate school to play professional lacrosse in the indoor league in the NLL for the Philly Wings. You also work as a strength coach in Woodbine, Maryland. You also pass your NPTE. You pass your board exams on the first try. So I'm saying all this to highlight that you're doing so many different things at once and still manage to be very successful. On the flip side, I see students come out and they say, I don't want to work because I have to prepare for the exam. They say, I don't want to treat patients because I have to study. And they fail. So what is going on there? Is that a product of Kevin Lynch is just really good at multitasking? Or were your activities and your ability to stay busy actually prepare you better for the exam?
Yeah, it's funny. I always say, so like the NLL season would run from November till about like this time of year, like beginning of May, end of April. And I always say that I was a better student during the season than I would
Because
be in the summer. I think to your point, like being so busy and like on top of myself for everything that I have, I really valued the routine that I would do. I'd wake up, work out, go to class, I would coach a youth lacrosse team, then train again for lacrosse, and then come back. And if there was homework or an assignment or studying, I would do that. Um, and that was just like the grind. Like I really loved it. My journey from Queens to Delaware, I ended up walking on to Delaware. And I think that's where I kind of learned it's going to take like daily effort to achieve big things that you want to achieve. Walking onto Delaware is one of like the hardest things that I had to go through. I think from like an athletic and work ethic standpoint, I was right there with the Division I caliber. It was about like getting my talent up, which I stayed dedicated to, worked day in and day out to do, and ended up being successful in that. And with that, I made the team, became a captain, this, that, and the other. I kept that habit with me each and every single day. It was always like first guy in, last guy out. So I think I'm in my comfort zone being uncomfortable, right? Like
I love
I
that. Being
wake up,
uncomfortable, being
and go.
busy,
Yeah.
right? Having to prioritize. The reason I love that in applicants is, I've spoken to staff members who have eventually gone on to do other things, and they would struggle with treating patients and writing notes. And they're like, it's just really hard to keep up with that. And I'm like, you treat a patient once every 45 minutes. Go to a pivot and treat a patient every 20 minutes. Then tell me how hard it is to keep up with all those things and have a personal life. It sounds like you just improved the skill of prioritizing your time. And that goes so far in any career. That's not just the PT thing.
Yeah. And I honestly didn't even realize I was doing it until I got to my like my mill outpatient rotation, where like you said, like a pivot where you're getting a ton of people all at once and you got to treat people, write notes, remember everything. Um, that's where it really stuck to me. I was like, wow, the work that I've been doing the past like 6, 7 years, this workload feels on brand with what I've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. It's amazing that you were able to create like a high level of stress and then aptitude in your personal life,
Yeah.
and translate it to your work life, which is it's a really unbelievable and powerful skill. That's why I wanted to have you on this pod. Give me one non-negotiable, having been through the test, seeing your success with the test versus maybe some of your colleagues that didn't do as well on the exam. One non-negotiable to passing your board exam.
I think for me, blocking out the outside noise, and this was one of my like core values I carried through PT school. I think one of the worst things you can do is talk to a bunch of people about the exam and how worried you are about the exam and how big of an idea it may seem. I think if you stick to yourself and kind of stay in your lane, you block out that outside noise and any anxiety that may come, and you just focus on getting better each day without worrying about how other people are feeling about the exam, how other people are worried about the exam. Everyone's going to be different. Like test taking is, I think, like a pretty niche skill for everybody. So someone's opinion on an exam is going to be way different than my opinion. You'll talk to your classmate who says, "Oh, I definitely failed that," and then they get a 98 on the exam.
Yep.
Right. So like you can't listen to them being worried if it's not really applicable to how you feel. I think blocking out anxiety helped me focus better in my studying.
I was going to say that's it's such a mind shift, and like the way you perform on day of exam has so much to do with your mental fortitude, where your headspace is when you actually sit down for that exam. And dude, I wish I would have known that, because I was one of those people that would just like freak the F out over things. And like the exam was such an albatross. I was so worried about it. I also found, again, I took the board exams a long time ago, but I found that my practice exams did not correlate well with what I actually sat down for. Like I failed I don't think I passed one practice exam and I crushed the boards. Is it still like that?
I have heard that. Back to like the therapy ed service that school provided us, I felt that a lot of those practice questions were harder than the actual NPTE. And again, like there were some things on the exam where I was like, wow, I've never seen that before in my life. I have no idea. So it's hard to really predict. But I do think, to your point, if you're doing well on the practice exams, that's a pretty good indicator you'll do well on the board exam.
But if you're not, there's still a shot in hell that you pass.
There's still a shot. Still a shot.
So you're saying there's a chance. Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. Let's dig into your experience as a student um, doing rotations. So compare and contrast experience at True Sports, because I know you were with us in the Bear Hills location where you're going to be a full-time staff PT come June 1 or thereabouts. Compare that experience to your other outpatient experiences. What should a student be looking for when they decide or apply for their student rotations?
Um, so the way Maryland works, True Sports was our elective. So you're supposed to take a inpatient rotation, outpatient rotation, and then you get to choose an elective. So for instance, True Sports would feel like a sports rehab elective. Um, Other options would be like a pediatrics elective. Like there's like a burn one if people are interested in doing like burns. Um, and it's tough because some people come into PT school and they have no idea what setting they want to work in. I think getting exposure while you're in your classwork portion of PT school, so going out and shadowing places, shadowing different like a sports place or like a pelvic floor place, different niche things that could be a rehab elective. Getting exposure to that, having a little bit more background knowledge of what PT is compared to maybe what you had before entering school, that can kind of narrow down where you want to head as far as a specialization or like maybe where that rehab elective is going to be.
Okay. So, and how do you go about doing that? Like, how did you find places to volunteer or shadow?
I was fortunate. I kind of had an idea that I wanted to do sports, and coaching lacrosse throughout PT school. I met like a ton of people that were in like the fitness setting who are connected with like sports PTs. Um, so for me, like I valued like making connections. Like I didn't care who it was, just like anytime, let me get your name, number. Like this is who I am. Let me know a little bit about you. Um, that kind of helped widen my scope of what all is out there and kind of how each place is ran a little bit differently.
Okay. Tell me more about that though, because that is truly one of your strong points is developing and maintaining a relationship. Kev, like I met you when you were in 10th grade and
Yeah.
somehow you stayed on my radar, True Sports' radar for 6, 7 years. How do you do that? How can you coach someone to do that?
So I attribute a lot of that when I was in college at University of Delaware. We had our alumni group is great. And a lot of like lacrosse guys end up going into like the business and finance sector. So we'll have alumni come back and talk to us and they'll talk to the importance of connecting, and like the motto is always follow up. So Steve Shaw actually is like one of the head of the like alumni group for University of Delaware. Um, they would provide great examples and great stories of what following up looks like and where it can take you. I know guys who um, maybe weren't like the best students who are now like working on Wall Street with great jobs solely because they made connections. It's a little bit different. I think people that are in like the medical field don't see it that way. Um, but I kind of took what they taught me and realized that yes, this is like a medical profession, but it still is a business and it's a very interpersonal business. So making connections is going to be huge. And I think in general, I'm just more of a social person. So it's easier for me to go out and talk to people and learn something from someone who's been in the industry for years.
Okay, so let's say you're a guy who's graduating University of Maryland in 2 years. You want to develop a relationship with a True Sports or one of our competitors or someone. What kind of playbook should one follow to develop those relationships? How often do you email? What's the context of the email? When are you calling? When are you texting? When are you just showing up? Like, teach me how to do it.
Okay. Um, so let's say I'm out coaching out at the supermarket. I meet someone who maybe knows someone or gives me their card. Reach out with a phone call, email. If they get back to you, great. And then I would wait like 3 days to 5 days time and then reach back out again with either a text message or an email being like, hey, it was great to connect with you. Would love to connect again, maybe get coffee. I'd love to come check out your clinic, something like that. I think, and you might be able to speak to this as well. I think people in a position where maybe they're running their own clinic, owning their own company, they appreciate the proactivity of people trying to make that connection, um, and showing like genuine interest. And with that, it isn't like, oh, like here's my business card, I'll give you one call, and then 6 months later, I'll be like, hey, do you remember me? Like, no, it has to be pretty frequent in the sense of like maybe like once a month, once every 2 months, like checking in, being like, hey, how are things going? School's great. Do you have a day that I can come in and shadow, check things out?
How systematic are you with that? Like, did you keep a Rolodex or a handbook of like how to do that?
It's all up here. No. A lot of times, like I'll make connections and kind of keep a Rolodex for that early stage of like connecting and then reaching out within the first 2 weeks. And then honestly, if there's like a genuine connection that I feel with that person, then it's easy for me to keep a relationship going. And that's like solely from within versus if maybe it's someone from a couple states away, or I don't
Mhm.
know, a scenario where I don't really see myself like being able to keep that connection up, it can kind of fizzle out. And that's where I bottleneck everything, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think you're spot on. Like when people apply to me or reach out, I want to see consistency. There are a million times where I'll get an email or a text and I just don't get back to them, and that's a weakness of mine. But if they can follow up, that is definitely gold to me. I'm like you, like I'm kind of Rain Man-y like that, where it's like sitting in the back of my head and it's like, oh, I forgot to hit this person, or they didn't get back to me, or whatever. Um, I think I would do better if I was actually keeping a log. And you make a great point that the principles in business are so applicable to physical therapy and what we do. Like I have seen people in the real estate industry, in the finance industry, the way they categorize prospects and the way they catalog actual touch points. And they're very systematic about it. They're very almost robotic about it, but it keeps them on task. That's good for two things. One, eventually, hopefully, it leads to a response or the outcome you're hoping for. But also, it fuels the idea of productivity within you. You know that you didn't spend time like staring out the window. You know you're clicking down your checklist of things to do. It brings a tremendous amount of self gratification, fuels future relationships. So I think I can definitely learn from that and do more of that. But the more you kind of take out of your brain and the more you put onto your to-do list or a checklist of what you're actually doing, and when that pertains to relationships, man, that's freaking powerful. So along those lines, talking about like how business is business is business. So business education and how it affects what you do in the physical therapy world. You spent an entire year getting a certificate in business from University of Delaware. Tell me what you learned there that either will hopefully help you in your career or actually helped you in your graduate education.
I guess so. The certificate of business at Delaware was nice because it gave kind of like the baseline level of knowledge for every kind of aspect of what a business major would entail. So we had like an econ class, accounting class, marketing class, and then just like a general finance class. You kind of get a little mix of everything.
Wish I would have
Um,
done that. I wish I would have done that. Anyone
yeah,
out
and
there listening, do find out how to get business education. But go ahead. Yeah, tell me what you learned.
yeah, I think the biggest thing that I took away, that maybe that I think definitely someone who just went through PT school where we don't get any sort of education on this stuff is the accounting side of like balancing books, whether that's your own personal finances or um, like within a clinic, within a company. So like as I'm out on these rotations, I'm keeping in mind like, okay, we have this amount of patients coming in per day. How much do I think it is to keep the lights on in here? Like that sort of thing is kind of always like running through my head, and like the idea of what that turnout is. I personally haven't like sat down and written anything out on what that may be, but it's always something that I keep in mind and kind of rationalizes how certain businesses run certain ways.
Okay, so I love hearing that as your future employer. Not everyone would, I don't think, but I love that because that sets you up to just understand how a business works. How does true sports work? How does the physical therapy field work, in network, out of network, et cetera? I'll tell you why that's so important to me. I have conversations with employees and they'll say to me, I made less on my W-2 in 25 than I did in 24. What's going on? Why is that the case? This doesn't make any sense. I'm like, well, wait a minute. How many patients did you see? How did that correlate to what you were able to take home? What did you do with how much you're putting into your HSA? What were your premiums and how much the company is kicking? Actually, if you look at it, yes, your W-2 might be less, but your overall value creation was far higher. You have to understand how all these metrics go into what you're quote unquote earning. And they're different buckets. And I think that gets lost on applicants, students, younger clinicians when they just look at what is my salary. Am I missing anything on that? Or can you see the value there?
Yeah, so that's one of the big things taking away from PT school, especially going to like the application process. Um, One thing, and talking to my classmates too, like we got no education on what an interview process looks like. So even what questions to ask, and that's not about what can you provide for me? It's questions about myself. Like, what about your offer and my own personal life? How am I going to make that work with working for you? Um, that's definitely a humongous lapse in physical therapy. And I think a lot of new applicants, whether it be ignorance or just lack of awareness, don't ask the questions that are going to help them out when they're like 2 years into the industry, right?
Okay,
They might
what are those
accept the first.
questions? Great points. I hate that our graduate education doesn't prepare us in that world. I went to the same grad school you went to. My business education was next to nothing, so much so that we had to write, like, I don't know what they called it, like let's call it a capstone project on some type of business offering. My project was on essentially true sports. Here's how I'm going to grow it. Here's where I'm going to put it. Here's what rent's going to look like. Here's how many patients I need to see to do it. Here's what insurance contracts need to look like. Here's what I'm going to pay employees. Put all that together, submitted it. I thought it was really good. They said, great work. You have a C. That was my business plan. And no one's perfect. And true sports will be bigger tomorrow than it is today and more successful tomorrow than it is today. But dude, it worked. And they gave me a C. So my point is they were looking at things that weren't real world, because real world, I'm proving that it works to some degree, right?
Yeah.
So then that comes back to the question, what are your questions that you need to be asking for your personal finance? And then was there any more business that you wish they would have given you, and what would that have looked like?
So I think questions to ask, you first have to understand where you are in your life and kind of what your next, let's call it 5 years, may look like. I've had classmates who are my age, I'm 25 years old, who are set to get married this summer. Their life looks a little bit different than mine. My questions might be based on, okay, here's my base salary. How is that going to work? So is it going to be based on how many patients I see each week? And that kind of determines my pay, which for someone like me, who I really appreciate the value of being able to own my own work, and like however hard I work, that is rewarded. Or is it kind of like a set rate on just hours? That might be better for someone who is okay with working like a, I don't know, standard 9 to 5 or whatever it might be. I think those things like that can play into the work-life balance issue that many new PTs probably run into. And then I think looking at like benefits, you mentioned like HSA, different like talking about like
Retirement.
IRAs and stuff like
Yep.
retirement, stuff like that. And even me, I'm talking about this now, like I'm no expert in it either. But it is important, like asking those things, because where you may be in life, that could be more important compared to, I guess, where I am right now in life. Like I'm a fresh new grad, still renting, like not really worried about like buying a home anytime soon. So my value in what a job looks like may be different than my one classmate who's set to get married and buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes with like different time needs, different, willingness to work, different hours. I think that was probably, given my baseline knowledge of business, that's like what kind of where I steered my ship and my questions that I asked. And then I'm sorry, I forgot your second question.
Yeah. Then my next question is, what should the graduate programs be teaching more so to educate their students to hit the ground running?
We got like I think like a 2 hour lecture kind of on what like different retirement plans look like. I think we need to be educated more on how maybe a cash-based clinic versus insurance-based clinics work. Um, common like benefits packages you may see and what they all mean and what that all looks like. Whether that's like your own insurance, again, like retirement plans. Um, I think there needs to be something each and every semester that and an assignment involved that makes us really think about decisions that we may have to make down the road. So that could be even like replicating like, here's a case scenario. You're a 25-year-old male who lives alone. You have two job offers. This is what you have to entail. And then we can all talk about like, okay, where is that going to lead me in the next 5 years? Like, what does
Yeah.
that look like?
Do you know of any programs that have something like that do a better
No,
job of it?
no, not a clue. I don't know many other physical therapy students at other schools. So there may be stuff out there, but I think generally across the board, it's probably something that all PT schools are kind of lacking.
Yeah, I think you're right. I know Northeastern has an interesting setup where I think they spend like far more time in clinics than most, where they'll get all of their education up front, then all of their clinical stuff on the backside. I think they have a unique setup like that in terms of actual understanding of finance. By the way, is this the job of the graduate school? I think this is actually the job of the high school to teach you personal finances and like understanding the way capitalism works and ways to go about it. I mean, I hear it daily, or I should say weekly, from my HR. We do a leadership meeting with myself, our COO, Tim Stone, our head of admin, and our head of HR. And our HR tells me, I'm talking to a lot of PTs. They don't know what an IRA is. Like, they don't understand how it works. Is that on the graduate school? I don't know. They should have gotten it earlier, but understanding these principles are important. One thing that you mentioned that I think is so valuable is knowing thyself. Kev, you know what you're capable of. You know what makes you tick. I think you know the options that are in front of you. Like, you know what a true sports looks like because you spend time, you developed that relationship with us. You did a clinical rotation with us. You know what a day in the life of true sports looks like. You have to weigh that with what does it look like in pivot? What does it look? I might be able to make 5, 10 grand more working for a physician-owned practice. What is that going to make me tick? Like, am I going to come home at the end of the day and say, I had a really great day and I really felt like I was valued and I gave my best to the patient because that's what's important? Or is it, I'm making 5 to 10 grand extra? I don't care what I'm doing. Like, I could be shoveling manure, to use Tim's quote. Just pay me 5 to 10 more grand and I don't care. You have to figure that out for yourself. And to your previous point, the only way you actually know what transpires in these clinics, it's not from a website. It is from other employees. It is from actually spending time. And then you got to figure out, does this sit right with me? I might be leaving a few grand on the table, but I'm spending this amount of time with patients. That really matters. Or I don't care about spending time with a patient. I don't care about having turf in my clinic and barbells and whatever and a plyo wall, et cetera. I need to make 10 grand extra. So then the conversation, or it's just different. But I think you have to have eyes wide open and kind of know these things, like what buckets you need to fill. And because you're filling those buckets, what buckets are then going to be empty? Like, what is the trade-off for what I'm getting? I did
Yeah.
not get that in my grad school education. I think it's rare, unfortunately. Kev, with you know what the hell you want. You know what you need. You're renting. You're 25 years old. You know what the value of a dollar is currently. You know where you want to be treating. This is important to me. That's important to me. This is not important to me, et cetera. I think that's step one. Figure that out, then understand all the levers you can pull.
Yeah. And I think like that's great on the business side of things. What really kind of solidified me was I knew I wanted to do like outpatient and like MSK world. I had my general mill outpatient rotation. And you don't get paid your rotations. Like you're pretty much like working for free.
Yep.
I mean, I would leave some of those days being like, wow, that sucked. That was terrible. Versus every day that I was at True Sports, I didn't get paid, but we worked long days, saw a lot of people, and I'd walk out of there being like, that was really fulfilling. And you take all like the business and all that aside, like at the end of the day, that's like a setting that drew to me because I was able to walk out of somewhere where I worked 13 hours and didn't get paid a dime, but I walked out of there like feeling good about what I just did that day, which I
Yeah.
think that kind of definitely swayed my decision into locking it in with True Sports.
Yeah, and for transparency sake, like to all those listening that don't know like what True Sports does and what the economics are around what True Sports does. True Sports gives you the opportunity to make a lot of money. It also gives you the opportunity to treat in a one-on-one fashion. Uh, the key word there is opportunity. Like, do you want to have the opportunity? And like you said, like you're going to bet on yourself every day that you're going to generate patients and give great care and see patients come back, et cetera. Or is that not you? And then maybe you belong like in a hospital outpatient where it doesn't really matter how many you see, et cetera, to very small, but you're guaranteed, et cetera. And can you find fulfillment there? I think those are the things, like finding fulfillment is what leads to longevity in the career. And we have a crisis in our career with longevity. Like people are jumping ship rapidly. Why is that?
I think that's tough. I think a lot of people come out of school with a lot of loans and they might jump on that first offer that's five, like you said, 5 to 10 more, but you're getting swamped with work, you're shoveling manure, and that gets to be a lot. You can probably last when you're in your mid 20s and you have plenty of energy, plenty of drive to do it. But as life starts to carry on and you start thinking about having a wife or a husband and having kids, getting a house, like that can all kind of wear on you. And like the day to day, if you kind of lose that energy that you once had and you're still working this mill outpatient, but it's you're just trying to make ends meet, like I can imagine that that would be pretty wearing. So like you said, we're choosing a job where maybe we don't feel fulfilled within ourselves, but it makes sense for our checkbook. That can only last for so long.
Yeah, it doesn't last. Dude, that was my first job. I mean, I've
Yeah.
said it a number of times in on this pod. Like, I took my first job in an outpatient setting because they offered me 5 grand more. When I actually did the math, which I didn't do prior, like for me, it was just a competition. Like, how much can I squeeze out of my boss? Get the highest offer. I feel like I won. I get into the clinic. I treat 17, 20 patients on a day. They gave me 5 grand extra. I start doing the math. I'm making an extra $100 a week,
Right.
$200 like it ain't worth it. I would pay someone $500 not to want to kill myself when I walk into that facility, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's a big problem. I wish we did more educating, but that's why we have the True Sports Physical Therapy Pod to educate our young budding clinicians. Okay, let's get a little bit more into the clinical side. Not only were you playing at a high level lacrosse, not only were you succeeding in the classroom, you were also a patient, right? Like you saw this field from the patient side of things. I think that's really valuable. So put your patient hat on for a second. If you're a patient, what makes an outstanding clinical session?
Um, I think patient being like how I was, let's talk in the
Yeah.
I'm an athlete that was a patient.
Yep.
Um, for me, it was understanding where I was as an athlete. I came to True Sports at the time. I was just starting to play with Philly. Um, so for me, like I had been through plenty of high level workouts, high level training sessions. Um, Coming in, having a therapist in Tim Stone who knew exactly like where I was at like a training level and did like the nitty gritty, like the table work and like the small tedious exercises, and then we build it up to more comprehensive movements that kept me engaged, kept me challenged. Um, I think a lot of athletes can resonate with that, and maybe where a lot of athletes may struggle or kind of get bored with the rehab process is when they're getting handed the same exercises every single day. And yes, they may be necessary and maybe simple, but um, we as therapists have to find a way to challenge and keep athletes engaged. Even if it is like something as simple as like heel slides, like a straight leg raise, you have to add certain things that are going to make it challenging, have to add certain motivations that are going to make that competitive athlete like want more out of the session.
Yeah, give me a specific example that Tim did with you where he was able to take the simple and then eventually graduate to the complex that scratched your athletic itch.
So I came in with, I was playing in my first game and sprinting down the floor and like tore my hammy like pretty bad, like bruised and everything. And then we had a game that next week. Uh, or sorry, we had a bye week and then a game the following week. So I had 2 weeks to try to get ready to get back. Um, and I was able to do like a lot of like running and like I seemed like I was in pretty good shape. Tim made the hardest version of a bridge with a hamstring slide by putting my heel in like a TRX. I still do that like to this day. Like it's something as simple as that. He added just like a new parameter by putting my heel instead of on a slider into the TRX handle. Uh, and it challenged me. Like I couldn't do it. And that like lit the fire in my head being like, dang, like I really need to like learn how to do this. Like this is going to be the next step in my rehab that's going to get me better.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't rocket science. She just changed one little thing. Um,
But
and I
by the
think
way,
it
that
made the
that
difference.
in and of itself is rocket science because it's like the genius of finding something that's hard enough that's not going to hurt the athlete that is eventually doable. Probably explaining it. It helps when it's explained in a masterful Australian accent, but
Yeah,
explaining it to a guy so that he can understand the background of what he's doing. And by the way, how far he's come because day one in your rehab, you probably couldn't do that. And so, like explaining, hey, remember a week ago when you couldn't do a single leg bridge? Now we're doing it like this. Here's why it translate. I think that goes a long way. But that education piece, a great PT is two things. One, they're a great strength coach, and two, they are an outstanding educator. And so, like, I'm working with a linebacker now, and he's early stage ACL, and we're doing single leg rotational med ball toss. And if I just give that to a guy and say, hey, we're going to do this, if I'm not explaining why that is in actuality the beginnings of change of direction, and then what change of direction will eventually look like, and give him in 2 weeks, it's going to look like this. 2 months, it's going to look like that. Then this is what it's going to look like at month 6, 7, when you're, and this is why we're doing it now. He's like, what the hell is my therapist doing? Or like, what am I doing with my time? So I have no doubt that Tim's ability to educate on why the TRX bridge is important, how it pertains to your sport, goes a really long way. I think it's a very high level of outpatient physical therapy, but I think it's something that everyone should be expected to get to. And that's the difference between a outpatient PT, a sports PT, and an excellent sports PT.
absolutely. And I think giving the athlete like the reasoning behind
Yeah.
everything, they're going to be competitive enough to where if you'd be like, all right, if we're able to do this, we can build to this next step. They're going to be like, oh, hell yeah. And they're going to
Yep.
go all in. Like, even if it's challenging, like and they may compensate and then you work on that as you see it, but they're going to do everything in their power to get to that next step. If you lay out the framework for them, like that's really going to like, if you give them the process, athletes get there by trusting their own process day in and day out. So
Yep.
that's a great point that you made, like laying the foundation out, changing the perspective on what exercises are. Like it's not just, oh, like we're trying to heal an injury. It's like, no, we're building to something for like your performance. It's performance training at the end of the day.
What do you think it's going to take for you to get to that Tim Stone level?
I think dealing with different, and I've already experienced this with coaching, um, athletes respond to different motivations differently. Like you could just cut and dry lay something out to an athlete like, okay, here's the framework. We're going to build. This is going to be the first 3 weeks. Then we're going to build to the next phase of this exercise. Um, versus like some athletes, you might throw all this jargon at them and like the big grand scheme foundation out. And they may be like, all right, like, so what? Like, I'm still here. This still sucks.
Yeah.
So I think dealing with people that respond differently and kind of going through those conversations myself, which I haven't had to do much of yet, but I'm excited to see how different I lay out certain motivations. I had to coach a U9 lacrosse team last year, uh, and I quickly realized I had no idea how to teach someone how to catch and throw. Meanwhile, I've been playing lacrosse since I was 5 years old. I get there, I
Yeah.
come with
Sounds
like
like it.
a great like practice plan, like I'm all fired up. And then I get to the very first practice, and none of these kids, they're like falling down when they like. I was like, oh god. So that was like a big eye-opening moment on how I'm going to break something down and deliver information to someone that's way different than the high schoolers I've been coaching the year prior. Uh,
Yeah.
so I think like experience with that, and for me, it was a lot of like trial and error, but going through those experiences myself, like I learned what works and what didn't.
Yeah. That I think something that I've seen make average PTs great is actually coaching youth level sport and movement.
Yeah.
I mean, it very rapidly makes you realize how much you have to strip away. And that's even when you're working with an NFL guy and he tears his ACL and now you have to teach him how to do a quad set. He's a 9-year-old.
Yep.
Even though he's running a 4.3, today he's a 9-year-old and you have to like peel down. That's where we came up with heel pop. Like, what is the one cue I can give people
Mhm.
that they know that they've done the exercise properly, that I can just say it and they get it? You have to understand that these patients coming in, no matter how high level of an athlete they are 9-year-olds. So that's
Yep.
a great teaching tool, something that I encourage everyone to do. Between today and when you start in a month from now, you just passed the boards, you're going to start working in a month. What do you plan to do to make sure that you hit the ground running come June 1?
So now, like I think you mentioned earlier in the pod here, I'm working over in Woodbine doing some strength and conditioning work with middle and high school athletes. That's all great, and I've been able to have some liberty and autonomy with like writing certain workout programs for like the healthy athlete. I think I've been so kind of like blundered with like studying NPTE stuff and like you know all the trivial stuff that comes with it. I do think now I need to have a refresh on what my flow is going to look like. So whether that's like going over to a buddy's house who may be having like ankle pain or something, run through my own eval. Be like, hey
Yeah.
man, like I'm starting in a month. Like I know you like to work out and like this is bugging you. Like let's let's get together and I'll just like practice how my eval's going to go. And kind of you get some like liberty with that because there's no one judging you and I can kind of work through processes myself. Um, I've already been able to do that for like two or three of my buddies so far, and each time's getting a little bit more smooth. Um, and then on top of that, I'll probably brush up. I might look to get do some like other like continuing education through NSCA. I have to do that to keep my CSCS up. So trying to find things to fill the time.
How do you not burn out?
Um, I ran into that a little bit in PT school. You mentioned like how much I was doing, and I quickly realized like you can get spread thin pretty quick. Um, I don't burn out by understanding when my free time is and like when my time to relax is and owning that time. So like and trying not to block out like anxiety of, oh, I have this I have to do like no, this is my free time, this is my reset period. This is gonna make my rest. I'm gonna hit the ground running when I get back to Monday morning when I have work to do. That's a big thing. And then also being not being afraid to say no. Um, Throughout PT school, I took like every coaching job I could get, like coaching lacrosse. I was coaching like three teams at once. Um, it was good money at the time, but I think it's better to be good at one or two things, or better to be great at one or two things than good at like five different things and
Mm-hmm.
then have all the workload. So once I finally learned how to start saying no, I was able to balance my plate a little bit better and take care of what I valued and give myself some free time to rest, recover, hit the ground running when it was time to work again.
What is that free time? What do you do?
Um, Lie down, chill. I I live on a farmhouse right now, so there's like a it's like a horse estate, and then in the back is like a little farmhouse. So I got a pretty nice view outside. So kind of just relaxing here.
Dude, there is magic in allowing time for space out.
Oh yeah.
Like, with how much we have incoming, whether it be a phone or TV or whatever, not having things that are inbound can be a magical time. And I think too often, like with a hard charger like you would look at that as wasted time when in actuality it's necessary time. It's kind of it's a great way to make sure that you're going to be great come Monday morning.
Yeah, I think I pick a lot of it up from like my own like strength and conditioning training. Like you need to value that day off of like active recovery or whatever it is. Like that in and of itself is getting better.
Yeah.
Whether you're like it may not feel like it or not, like you allowing yourself to recharge, you're gonna get the most out of whatever training session you have next. And for me, that's studying or doing whatever it is for class, training for lacrosse. You're going to get more out of that session if I come in fresh, ready to go, than tired off of 6 straight days of hitting it hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Important for the type A's out there to hear that. Okay. Let me close with the Eric Cressey lightning round.
Okay.
Ready, Kev? First answers that pop in your head. Just make sure they're the right answers.
All right.
The number one book or podcast that you have read or listened to that changed the way you look at the world?
Oh, that's tough. I'm going to go with The Hard Hat by John Gordon.
Because
It's about Cornell lacrosse player George Boyardi. He died on the field diving in front of a shot, hit him in the chest. And his life was pretty impactful. He was described as like not always the most talented, but easily the hardest working and the best teammate on the field. And at University of Delaware, um, our head coach gives out the Hard Hat Award every year. I was fortunate enough to win it after Ryan Shaw had it.
love it.
And
Two
with
legends.
that inspired me to get the book and read it. And it goes through like the 21 best ways to be a great teammate. And I think a lot of the things that were in there I had emulated beforehand, and then I picked up even more traits just after reading that book.
Awesome. Okay, good freaking answer. Next, who is the best physical therapist in the country right now?
In the country right now, let's see. Um, Dr. Tim Stone, he got me ready. I
Other
went
than
through
Tim Stone,
other than
present
Tim Stone.
company excluded, True Sports excluded. Who's the best in the biz out there?
I love Q. I follow him on Instagram.
Yeah.
He does a great job of articulating um, different things that therapists kind of run into. I think he talks a lot about pain and kind of how we are. I saw a post recently about him talking about how pain is kind of described from therapists and how we approach pain. And he's also a beast. I mean, he's a guy who walks the walk, talks the talk for sure, but he's a guy that does it himself. And I think that's like a huge thing that sports physical therapists need to do.
He's a monster. His name's Quentin Willie. So he's been on the pod twice. I've learned a ton from him. I'm also amazed at how simply nice he is.
Yeah.
Just such a nice guy. Picks up the phone whenever you call him. Always willing to give a minute. He's just a great face for the profession and what the profession should be. I've mentioned this a couple times on the pod, like over and over again. I meet people at the top of the field, and they are just good dudes. I would put Eric Cressey on that list. I would put Kelly Starrett on that list. Q is a great example of that. Joe DeFranco, like guys who seem untouchable and have every right to be unapproachable. Not the case. Mike Reinold.
Yep.
Like, even the fact that he is a masshole, he is the best, like the best dude. You would never know that he was, in my humble opinion, the best overhead PT we have in the field right now. Just good people. Okay. The number one podcast outside of this one that PTs need to listen to, that would include business lessons, life lessons, physical therapy lessons. What do I need to be listening to?
This is a good one because I was in between the Hard Hat and this guy's book. I love the Daily Stoic. I think it's Ryan Holiday runs that. So going through like a lot of his stuff also changed my life a good bit, and I frequently still listen to his podcast. Um, I think for me as a physical therapist and everything that I've done kind of rides on the foundations of like what stoicism is, and it allows therapists to be very present in what they're doing, which is super important as we're seeing multiple patients a day. Being present with that one patient, what we can do right now to help out. Like I think it can get pretty overwhelming, and therapists may lose sight of what's right in front of them. So I think living with some of those characteristics could help you like at work, at home, um, in like your own personal life, your own emotions. That that's really stuck with me.
I think it's awesome for the physical therapist. He's a legend in the stoicism sphere. It's also, if you can impart those principles to your patient, can help them tremendously. They're going
Absolutely.
through tremendous struggles, and it can make your mind spin when you're coming off of a big knee surgery, or I got to get
Yeah.
back to this. If you can impart some concepts of stoicism, it helps with pain, but helps with outcomes, mindset, etc.
Yeah.
So that's great advice. Last but not least, who's the best lacrosse player you've ever seen in your life?
Oh, ever seen? That's tough. And I can't say Tim Stone again.
No.
Yeah, no,
One, because it's
can't
not
do
the
it.
right answer.
Um, my buddy Owen Grant, got to play with him at University of Delaware. I was a captain with him for 2 years. He plays for the Vancouver Warriors and the Boston Cannons. I mean, he's an absolute beast. He's a D guy, Canadian, able to push some offense too. It was great being able to play alongside him.
Got to get that guy on the pod.
Yeah.
Kev, tell all the PTs listening how they can find you, how they can keep learning from you, best way to get in touch.
Um, I'm on Instagram. I'm not very active.
You
That
will
would probably
be once
change.
June 1st comes.
Yep, that would probably change. Instagram right now is at kev.lynch _. Um, Outside of that, I'm not very public as is, but I'm sure that'll change. And keep an eye out for me on Instagram.
Okay, love it. I would implore everyone, like Kev is the model student, new employee, new teammate. You've shown unbelievable grit, determination, always professional, always even, always motivated. There's so much that I can learn, and I've learned in this conversation. I've seen since you were in 10th grade. But all the PTs out there, if you want to know how to succeed through graduate school, even through undergrad, different choices that you can make to set yourself up for success, reach out to Kev. Unbelievable resource. You can find them at Bear Hills starting June 1st. Kev, thank you so much for being a part. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a pleasure.
Guys, thanks for listening. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.